Hi there! Welcome to another Scriptcase tutorial. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be looking at importing Excel files into your Scriptcase application. My name is Nate Carpenter, and I'm just going to show you some of the basic components that go into this process. First is the database table. This is the table where you're going to import data into from your Excel file. Next, you're going to use the PHP Excel library. This is a third-party library that we're going to look at, but it comes built in to your Scriptcase installation, your Scriptcase development environment. So it's very nice and convenient. Third, you're going to use some Scriptcase applications. We're going to use a control and a blank application. And then lastly, we're going to do a good amount of Scriptcase programming using that PHP Excel library. So I hope that this makes sense to you, that this is helpful to you, can provide you lots of uses for your own developing. Let's get started and see how this works. Alright, so here we have our database table that I mentioned. This is just a basic table, and this of course can be any table structure that you need to import into, so whatever your use case would be. But we're going to keep it pretty basic. We're going to have a client ID, that's just an int 11, that's auto increment, a name, an email, a phone number, a create date, and a send email, which is just going to be a type of Boolean. So this is a pretty basic table, nothing too complicated here, but now you know the structure, so you understand some of the code that we're going to see later. Our first step is to set up a control application. We need a way to take an Excel file and import it into our system. So we first need to upload that file to the server. So that's what we're going to do with our control application. So I'm going to go up here to the top menu and click New Application. And I'm going to choose Control. And I'm going to call that Upload File, like that. Just a basic control application. And I'm going to click Create. Okay, so now we have our control application created here, and we need to add a couple fields to it. First, let's add an upload field. So we're going to go to Fields, New Field, just one new field for now. And under the type, we want it to be File Document. Document file name right here. Click that. And we're going to call that upload file, and the label is going to be file. Let's click create on that. Okay, so we have it here. And there's a bunch of different settings here. You could set which extensions you want. I'm going to do XLS and XLSX since we're just doing Excel files. But if you maybe had a different type you wanted, you could just add more. You just need to separate them by semicolons. After that, then it's pretty much set up, this document file name. So let's run this and see what it looks like. It should give us an upload area where we can either drag and drop, or we can click Browse and select something. So there that is, nothing too complicated. Now, we want to make sure the user understands what the structure of the Excel file needs to be for this to work, because this is very critical to us on the programming end. If the Excel file structure is not set up correctly, we cannot import it. So we're going to put an image right below this that displays the Excel file. So I have an image that's just a screenshot of the Excel file that we're going to be using. So let's go back to our development environment. We're going to add another field to contain that image, just one. And for the type, we're going to choose HTML image, like so. We're going to name it struct and label it structure. Let's click create. Okay, so now we have an image field. Now we just need to select our image. So I already have one in our Scriptcase development environment, so I'm going to upload that or use that. Go to the menu, I have it in the project, general images. There it is, our structure.png. Chuck it and then click add selected. And that should display our image. But we said we wanted it displayed right below here, so let's go back and make sure it's displayed below. So go to Edit Fields, and there it is. So that should be good. Let's go ahead and run this, see what it looks like. Okay, so here we have our upload area still. It grew a little bit because this image is a good size. And here we have our structure. So that should make it very easy for the user to know they can look at their Excel file and make sure that it matches this. So that makes it very easy for the user, makes it very nice and user-friendly. Okay, so this should now upload a file. And let's go ahead and try it. It's not going to do too much right now. But we're going to go browse, and I have my Excel file here. There it is. And let's click OK, and it should upload it. Okay, and it did that. I already had one uploaded there, so renamed it to customers 2. And Scriptcase will automatically do that. It'll increment the file name so as not to overwrite any other files there with the same name. Okay, so we've handled uploading the file. That's the first step. That's not too hard. And now we want to be able to process that file. So to do that, we need to set up a blank application with all the logic for processing our Excel file. So let's go ahead and set up that, and then we'll handle the logic to pass that file off to this blank application. So let's create the blank application. We're going to create new application here. And that's going to be a blank application right here. And I'm going to call it process file, like so, and click create. And if you're unfamiliar with a blank application really is just a place to put some code, to put some logic to execute. You don't need to worry about fields. You maybe don't need to worry about UI so much unless you want to hard code your UI manually. This, we're just going to worry about logic. So here I'm going to copy some code that I've already written, but I'm going to explain it. So here's the first little chunk. Let me copy it here. Okay, so we've got this. This is going to include our Excel file, our PHP Excel library. So that's pretty simple. That's the name of the library. This is all in the Scriptcase documentation. And that just includes it into our blank application. Next, we're going to get the Excel file. For this, we're going to assume that the Excel file name with its path is going to be passed in with this location variable. This is a Scriptcase variable. That's why it's in the square brackets. And that will be passed in from our control application that we just created. And we'll handle that in just a sec. And then thirdly, we're opening that file with the PHP Excel library. And there's lots of documentation online if you look for the PHP Excel library as to how to use that. But this is pretty much the gist of it. You just open it up and then we'll look at how to read through it. So let's do that next. I'm going to copy some more code in. Okay, so I copied quite a bit of code in here, but don't worry, I'm going to explain it, and it's actually pretty simple once you get the gist of it. First, it's going to get this worksheet iterator. As you know with Excel files, you can have multiple worksheets, and this program is going to be built to handle multiple worksheets as well. So we're going to do a for each loop, and for each of those worksheets, we're just going to call it worksheet. It's going to loop through each of those and do all this processing logic on it. So it's going to get a worksheet. Next, we're going to get the maximum number of rows, okay? So that's just the highest number of rows, and that way we know when we're done. And we also have a count at the end to know how many rows we inserted. Next, we're going to do this. This is going to begin a set of transactions in our MySQL database. If you're unfamiliar with that, basically a transaction is a set of operations you can do in a database, but then they don't actually take effect until you tell it to. So you can roll them back without any changes being made to your database. This is very nice and very convenient, and Scriptcase makes it very easy. So from here on, all the SQL that we execute is not actually going to be permanent. We have to tell it to actually write the data in order for it to actually take effect. That way, if we discover an error later on, we can just roll back the transactions and tell the user there is an issue. Okay? So now that we've got all that preliminary stuff set up, we can start looping through all the rows in the worksheet. So here we have another for loop. We're going to start at row 2, and the reason for that is because the first row, if you remember our structure here, is going to be a header row, and we're not too concerned about that header row right there. This is one base, so row 1 we're going to ignore, and we're going to start at row 2. So we're starting at row 2. As long as we don't go over our highest row, we're just going to keep incrementing a row. Now, we need to start getting the values out of those cells inside of our spreadsheet. So to do that, we get our worksheet. That's going to be an object. And from there, we can get our cell by column and row. So we give it the column, and it's going to be column 0, because we're getting the ID this time. And as you can see, this is column 0 here. It's just a 0 based, is how it works. And then our row, which is our counter here. So that's going to be 1, it's going to start at 2 and keep incrementing here to the left. So we get our ID out. So then we get that cell. That got the cell out. And then we need to get the value out of that cell using this getValue function. So once we get that, we have our ID. Now we need to make sure there's actually something in that ID. So here's the issue. Sometimes, depending on how your Excel spreadsheet is formatted, it might have a whole bunch of empty rows at the end that will still be read into this and read into this highest row number. So in order to account for that, we need to make sure that there is actually an ID in every row. If there is not an ID, then we assume the entire row is empty. So we just look and make sure that that ID field, ID cell, is not empty, that there's actually value in there. And if it is, then we're going to go ahead and continue processing. This would also handle an empty row in the middle of your Excel spreadsheet. This might be a case that you'd want to handle and might be somewhere convenient for you. So just so you know, that would also cover that situation. So now we're going to process the actual data. We don't care too much about the ID, because if you remember, our database table was auto-incrementing the ID, so we'll let the database calculate the ID automatically. So the first field that we saw in our Excel spreadsheet was the name that we care about. So we're going to get that name out. So we're looking at column 1. That's column 1, because this is column 0. And then the row, of course, again. Get that by column and row, the same way we did the ID, and then get the value. And we're going to store that in a variable called name. We're going to repeat that for the email and the phone number, the other 2 fields. And then the create date. Here, we're going to make sure it's formatted correctly for our database. So we're using this function here. We're going to get a formatted string with that value. That's the same way, but we're just wrapping it in this function here. And this is the format we need for a MySQL database, because that's the format for a MySQL date. And then we're going to get the email value out, the send email value out of there, column 5, and then the row. And so now we've got all our data out. Once we've gotten our data out, we want to validate our data. So first, we need to set this. This is our control. This is going to tell us if there weren't any errors. So right now, we're going to set it to false, and we don't set it to true until we've determined that all the data is valid. So first, we need to check all these fields. So we look and make sure the name field is empty. If it is empty, we're going to display an error message. We're going to say the name cell is empty, and we're going to give it the column and row so they know exactly where it is in the Excel spreadsheet. And we'll see how that works in just a little bit, and then just ask them to correct the value. It's going to repeat that for each of the fields: the name, the email, the phone, create date, and the send email. So it's going to output an error message for each of those, and it's going to tell them the column and row so that the user knows where to go and fix that. That will make it nice and convenient. If it did not discover any errors, so all of these ifs evaluated the false, it's going to assume that everything's valid. It's going to insert the data, but of course remember we're doing transactions, so we can roll this right back if there was an error. We're going to insert the data, and we're going to set the control to true. That way, we know to actually write the transactions. So now, let's handle that, writing the transactions and outputting a success message or canceling them and rolling them back. So I'm going to copy just a little bit more code. This is pretty simple. And I'm going to paste it here. Give myself a little bit of space there. So it's checking that control value and it's making sure that it is actually true, which would only be the case if it was set to true up here in the success condition. If it is, then we're going to commit those transactions. We're actually going to write it. And now that will be saved in our database. We're going to set our total value. And our highest row is 1 base, so we want to subtract it by 1 just to make it accurate. And then we're going to display our success message of the rows inserted successfully and display the total as well. If this was false and there was an error, then we're going to roll back those transactions if any occurred. So this way, if maybe one row was correct, but the second row was incorrect, or even one incorrect row in the Excel spreadsheet, we can't really trust the entire Excel spreadsheet. So we need to roll back all those insert statements that we might have made up here. So that way, nothing happened, and the user can correct their Excel file, re-upload it, and import all those rows correctly without any duplicates. So that is our logic for actually importing the Excel file. There's quite a bit there, but once you get used to it, it's pretty simple, and this can be expanded very easily for a more complicated Excel file or different types of data. So I hope you can see how that works. So now we're going to go back and we're going to handle actually redirecting after the file has been uploaded to this blank application with the file path set. So let's go ahead and try that. So we're going to go back to our blank application right here. And first we need to get that location variable set so that our blank application knows where the file is. So to do that, we're going to go events here on the left, and then the onValidate success. And this is the event that's going to be executed after the form has been submitted and validated. And then we're just going to set the location variable equal to this value. So all that is we need to get this part here. This is the path for the upload file that Scriptcase knows where it is. And then we're going to put a slash in there. And then the actual upload file right here. So this is the field variable because it's in the curly brackets. And this is just going to be the name of the file. So if you remember, after we uploaded over here, it displayed this name. That's going to be the value of that variable right here. So that's going to be the full path of our uploaded file. And that's going to be set as a variable, and we can pass that through to the blank application. Now, if we run this now, it's going to ask for an initial value of this, but this is an output variable. So let's go ahead and set that. So to do that, we're going to go to Application, Global Variable. And yes, we want to save the changes. And we're going to make it an output variable. Let's hit save on that. That way we won't get asked to put an initial value in there. So now we need to set this up to actually redirect to our process file application, our blank application. So we're going to go over here to application links. We need to create a new link since we have none. We're going to choose just an application link, click next. And our process file application, we'll select that right here. Click next again. And here we have that parameter that we set up over here, the location. So it knows to expect that. Scriptcase has already handled that. And we need to set it equal to our location variable that we already set up on our onValidate success event. So it's going to be a variable type like that. And then we can select our variable, or location variable. So that will pass through the file path for the uploaded file. So let's just click confirm here. And we can tell it to open in the same window. That's fine for this. And click save. So now, after we upload the file and click OK, it will automatically redirect to our process file application and will import our file. So let's go ahead and try this. Let's click run on this. So we're going to run it. It looks the same, of course, because we just changed the logic behind it. let's select a file. So I'm going to select that same file and then click OK. And as you can see here, there's a little error. And that's because I left one of the email fields blank. So let's go ahead and run that and see what it looks like. We see it's cell F11. That makes it very easy and convenient for us to find. So let me pull up the Excel file here. Here it is. And if you look in F11, it's blank. So let me assign a value to that. Let's save it and then close it out here. And let's try again. So we're going to go back, run our control application again, select the file again just like before, but this time it should be formatted correctly. And let's click OK. We should get a success message this time. And there we do. We got our rows imported successfully. Total rows 599. So it should be quite a bit in there. Now, just a quick side note, you might notice that this messaging looks a little bit nicer than the standard alert that would pop up in your browser. And that's because I'm using a new feature available with Scriptcase 9.4, the Sweetwater alerts. And I'll show you how they use that. So let's go back to the Scriptcase development environment. And we're going to go on our blank application here to Application, Settings. And then here you have the Use Sweetwater Alert. I just selected that, and then it's all set up. So it's going to overwrite any of the alerts that we put up here, the SC alerts, like here and down here. It's going to overwrite those with this nice looking alert. So that's just a quick side note. You don't have to use that, but it is nice. So now we should have our rows inserted like that. And let's go ahead and see if there are actually values in our database. So to do that, I'm going to go back to Scriptcase here. And I've got my applications here. I set up the process file and upload file. And I also have a grid here. This I already set up. It's just the basic grid that looks at that client's table and displays all the fields. So I'm going to go ahead and run this and see if that data is in there. And here we have all of our rows. We have 599 rows. That's the number of rows we inserted. All the data is there. It looks pretty decent. So there, it's all set up. That's pretty easy and convenient. So I hope that is helpful for you. I hope you can already see the amount of power that we have with Scriptcase importing all these Excel files. This could be very useful to your clients, perhaps, in importing their data and getting it all set up.